I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championships.
The rivalries, it's up there on top of the list, man. And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. Hey, welcome into JUCK on Bucks on a Friday morning. Appreciate you all so much for joining me. A big day here at JUCK on Bucks. Not really. It's just Friday, and we're going to talk about some college football as we do. We're talking some schedules, some Buckeye recruiting. It's been an extremely eventful 6 weeks since Ohio State won the national championship. Jim Knowles to Penn State, Chip Kelly to the Raiders, Justin Fry to the Cardinals, Brian Hartline gets elevated offensive coordinator, Tyler Bowen hired as the offensive line coach, lightning rod Matt Patricia hired as the defensive coordinator, changes in spring practice, cancellation of the spring game, pro day coming up, the guys getting ready for the draft at the combine as Ohio State tries to break that record. And through all of this, there's not been a single press conference from Ryan Day. He talked about Chip Kelly leaving a little bit with Joel Klatt. Couple of questions from Dom Taberry when he was on the Buckeye Cruise for Cancer about Matt Patricia. But outside of that, we've not really heard anything. Not a single word from any of the new hires. Apparently that ends today. At headquarters, Ryan Day is going to be speaking probably at 11 o'clock. That's usually when he does it. I don't got official word on that. Immediately following that, we're going to go live right here at JUCK on Bucks. That's right. You get a double dose of JUCK on Bucks today. I'll be pulling up your questions and comments. We will talk about everything that goes on in these press conferences, whoever ends up talking. So set those alarm bells for JUCK on Bucks live shows so that you're notified as soon as we go live. That's also for, I know a lot of you guys are YouTube junkies, right? Just like I am. I'm a YouTube junkie too. And we watch a ton of shows. And I know you try to support your favorite shows as much as you can. You like the video, like hopefully you're liking this one right now. You subscribe to the channels you like. You add comments, as you know, that really helps the show as well. But hitting that alarm bell helps a ton. I don't think a lot of people know this. Hit that alarm bell for shows you really like if you want to help, shows that you like with that algorithm that they talk about. You know what the algorithm is? You want to be good in the algorithm, you put out good shows. That's what you do. But that alarm bell definitely helps. So we don't know who we're going to get. Maybe we'll get Hartline. Maybe we'll get Patricia as well. I would love to know what questions you would ask either of them. And I was sitting here thinking, what questions would I ask Matt Patricia? Now, we've heard somebody's going to be asking Patricia why nobody hired him in the NFL as a defensive coordinator, which I think will be very rude. We'll see if that happens. Going to be an awkward one if it does. But if I had one question for new defensive coordinator Matt Patricia, I think my question would be, like, obviously, Matt, you've gone over the talent on the defensive side of the ball. And whenever you get a fresh set of eyes in any situation like this, there's usually a couple things that jump out. And you look at, okay, the previous staff didn't do this with that. For instance, if you or I were looking at this defense, we say, wow, look at this kid, CJ Hicks. Why didn't they have him here? You know what I mean? So, like, what was it that jumps out to him as, oh my gosh, I could do this with that? Obviously, he hasn't seen CJ Hicks. He's not seeing him on film. He'll see him in spring. But I think that's what a lot of us would say if we said, okay, we can change one thing about this roster coming up here. Who's going to go where? Where would we like to see somebody on that roster go and specialize in something? It would be CJ Hicks rushing the passer. Now, a lot of people are really high on that and think it's going to go really well and believe that that's what's going to happen. I'm somewhat hesitant still about not whether or not that'll happen. I totally believe he's going down there. I just don't know how well it's going to work out for him. I wish him all the best. I think he's a great kid, but we're in year 4 now. I just don't know. It might be a situation where it just never catches on the way that we all hope, but certainly am hoping for it. And he'll definitely get the opportunity, I think, with, that second wave of guys after Kenyatta and Caden Curry and transfer Logan George. You're looking at Josh Mickens and Dom Kirk. So he's going to have the opportunity. Zion Grady, the freshman, Episatani Lay, who knows? I mean, he's right in there in the running to get some serious playing time if they move him down there. But anyway, what is quickly becoming a budding rivalry in the Big Ten for supremacy in the conference. Obviously, you've got the classic ones. You got Ohio State and Michigan. You got Penn State always up there. Oregon now is officially coming in year 1, winning the conference, going undefeated. Put their name right in there. They're going to be a thorn in everybody's side. And as such, they have restructured Dan Lanning's deal. It's now what was a 6-year deal. They restructured the pay, and he's going to get a $2 million a year raise, going to guarantee him $11 million bucks a year. Buyout's only $20 million, which I think is really nice for the school. Sometimes on these ridiculous contracts, you see these enormous buyouts. So keeping that at 20 million is a pretty good deal. I don't think they're ever going to want to turn the page from him and fire him. But that puts Lanning as a top 5 highest paid coach in the country. And if you look at that top coaching list, he's in most people's top 5 after just 3 years as a head coach, which is, it's incredibly impressive. But coaching so much more than just what can you get done on Saturday on the sideline. Like, this guy is an expert program builder. What he's done with player acquisition, been fantastic. Obviously, yes, he's got a lot of support, but to me, being able to drum up that support and that excitement in most cases is reflective of the head coach and how much excitement he can bring in and how much people want to support him. And we saw Ryan Day really ramp up his efforts for that after 2023 and get a ton of support in 2024. Like, he deserves credit for that. You want to give coaches credit for that in most situations. I think a lot of people discredit Lanning because of the Nike money, but he's been an expert with that. Like, he's been fantastic. And yeah, Division Street certainly helps, no doubt. But let's not forget about this guy's hiring. Kenny Dillingham, Will Stein. These are also huge parts of being a head coach this day and age. How good do you hire? Kenny Dillingham and Will Stein, like, nobody was in on these guys. They become the best offensive coordinators in the country. Wide receiver coach Junior Adams gets hired away by the Cowboys. Carlos Lachlan gets hired away by Ohio State. Lachlan was a nobody till Lanning brought him in and gave him that opportunity. So these are the types of things when we talk about coach rankings. Like, these are the things I look at. And I sat down and tried to do my list of Big Ten coaches rankings. And the reason I was going to do it, I was going to rank the Big Ten coaches. I was going to rank the SEC coaches, and I wanted to pit them against each other because I was on with JR, my buddy over at the Buckeye Huddle last week. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. And we were talking about the Big Ten coaches versus the SEC coaches. And when you just look at the names at a glance without running any numbers, like, it really looks to me like, I think the Big Ten top to bottom might actually have a better crop of coaches than the SEC. But I'd have to sit down and really start crunching some numbers. So that's what I was going to do. I was going to rank them on each side and then pit them against each other. So let's say, for instance, if Brett Bielema was your number 5 versus Josh Heupel as your number 5 in the SEC, and pit them against each other like that and see who comes out on top. However, I found it impossible after James Franklin, Ryan Day, and Dan Lanning, who most people would say, okay, that's your your 3 top guys in the Big Ten. After that, it was just impossible, man. It was just impossible. Like, I don't know how to parse the difference between, like, old heads like Brett Bielema and Kirk Ferentz and Greg Schiano, who've had, a lot of accomplishments, and also, a lot of failure. Then you got the younger guys with some accomplishments and not going hot right now, like Lincoln Riley and Luke Fickell. You got the brand new guys that are on the up and up, like Jonathan Smith at Michigan State, Sharon Moore, Jed Fish, Matt Rule. Like, I don't know how to parse this between these guys other than, well, this is who I think will be better in the future. And I think that's just a crappy way to do things. So I don't know how to do it, and I gave up. But let's be honest. Being the coach, being the best coach, and how we judge coaches, like, the best coach doesn't always get the biggest job. How do you rank Brett Bielema at Illinois versus James Franklin at Penn State? Would Brett Bielema have just as much success over the last decade as James Franklin has at Penn State? I think so. Brett Bielema had 4 10-win seasons at Wisconsin out of 6 years. So how do we then say James Franklin is definitively better than Brett Bielema? That's why I think it's so impossible. I think the best way to do it, and I'll probably try it again, is judging these guys versus their own program standard. For instance, how does Ryan Day do at Ohio State, wins and losses versus the program standard over the last 20 years? How does he do in recruiting versus the program standard through multiple different coaching regimes? And I think maybe that'll help me narrow it down. So I'll go back to the drawing board. I'm going to try this exercise again. because it's the off season and I'm always looking to putz around and things like that. But you guys let me know just off the rip. What do you think? SEC or Big Ten? Who has the better crop of coaches? And obviously the Big Ten has 2 more teams, so you can throw out the 2 on the bottom. We just get that benefit of that. So anyway, speaking of the SEC, you're going to love this one. ESPN has released its strength of schedules, and we are going to the end of the season with, let's just say, a very heavily skewed strength of schedule metric towards the conference that went 1-5 against the Big Ten this year. And we'll break it down a little bit further later. But Aaron Noland in the class of 2025 was a quarterback that so many of us were so jazzed up for, had presumably an incredibly bright future ahead of him in the scarlet and gray. And Julian Fleming hit the market, hit the transfer portal after Nick Saban's retirement. Ryan Day brings Julian Sayin in, essentially, recruiting over top of Aaron Noland. Ryan Day really struggled with it. It was something I don't think Ryan Day would have done in the past. And to me, it kind of said something. It kind of said Ryan Day, okay, there's some changes going on. He's getting a little more cutthroat, going a little more all in, like we are going to win regardless. And he brings in Julian Sayin. And as soon as he did, it was certain that one of those guys was not going to end their career at Ohio State, right? Just certain. They're 2 top dogs of their class. One of them was going to leave at some point. And Julian Sayin promptly not just becomes the freshman who is further along, but jumps over 3rd string Lincoln Keenholz to take over that spot in short order. And we see Aaron Noland go to South Carolina. Now, I really am rooting for this kid. He talked to a South Carolina publication and asked why he chose South Carolina. He said the people here, they really all enjoy it, and they really take Coach Beamer's lead, and the offense feeds off of Coach Mike Shula. Also, the experience they have here playing SEC football, I feel like it's just a great opportunity to showcase my skills, and the opportunity to play is just one play away. So you got Lenoris Sellers as South Carolina's starting quarterback, and he is a stud, Heisman candidate this year. I love this kid. Love the family. I think he's awesome. And I hate to say it, but I feel like this is somewhat of a benefit of the transfer portal that we now get to see guys that come in that we get kind of attached to that maybe aren't going to play at Ohio State, go get a chance to show their skills somewhere else and give us a rooting interest. Like 2 years from now, let's say we're watching a South Carolina game, Aaron Noland's starting the game. Like, we're going to be very invested in that game. I'm going to be rooting for that kid hard. I'm going to be rooting for South Carolina that day. Let's say this upcoming season, a Cal game is on and Devin Brown is quarterbacking Cal. Like, I'm going to be totally in on that game. And this is just something that, it kind of spreads out rooting interest for me. And I kind of dig it. Whenever Penn State played, I was rooting for Julian Fleming. Unfortunately, that didn't work out so hot for him. Where it gets tough for me is Gabe Powers at Kansas State this year. Gabe Powers, I think, going to be a stud at Kansas State. And that's a guy I felt, he could have been in the rotation this year quite a bit, pretty heavily. Hero Kanu at Texas. That one really stings. I think if Hero Kanu had stayed on this team, he had a huge role coming up. And instead, we got to watch him over at Texas in game 1 coming into the shoe. And that sucks. So the good news is Ohio State has done a fantastic job keeping guys like Hero Kanu who are going to be involved at home. And very few instances of guys like Kanu, Mitchell Melton, who would have played a lot. Mitchell Melton could have had a real prime role on the team this year. Instead, he goes to Virginia. I don't know. It doesn't seem like the wisest move, but maybe he's going to go be the man at Virginia, and we'll see. But again, another guy I'm going to be rooting for heavily, Mitchell Melton in Virginia. But it has opened up a whole lot of different rooting interests. As much as, you hate guys leaving, for the most part, this is just the way of the world now, and it does give me some rooting interest elsewhere. But sometimes I feel like everybody watching the show has just kind of been with the show since we started. But, obviously that's not the case. This time last year, we had, I don't know, maybe 500 subscribers. So not everybody is kind of hip to what we do here during the off season. And I am kind of what you call, we used to recruitniks. Okay. I'm a recruitnik. And that is just someone who follows recruiting very, very heavily, which works out well because in the off season, when nothing's going on, obviously, tomorrow we're going to cover the press conferences. When spring ball starts, we're going to be all in on that. But when nothing's going on, we can get into recruiting very heavily because I am very well versed in it and know a whole lot about it and follow it very closely year round. And as the growth of the show has gotten bigger and bigger, it's opened up a lot of doors for me to be allowed to cover it from an angle that I never really thought possible, where now I can talk to these guys directly and not have to get fourth hand information, which has been really cool and advantageous when I report on it. So it's a little something that I think sets our show apart here. And today we will be going over some recruiting. We keep a big board of not all the offers, but all the guys at every position that I think Ohio State is in on heavily and most likely to end up in the class, and broken down by position, color coded. I'm working on that now. The first edition will be out soon. And we watch highlights of our favorite players. I try to familiarize everybody with these prospects. We'll watch a few today. If there's something interesting going on in someone's recruitment, or if they have a really interesting story, I'll bring a guy on from time to time, but we usually just stick to Buckeye commits. We got a 5-star Buckeye commitment coming on real soon here with a very interesting story. Anyway, last week, we got some updated rankings from 24/7 and On3. And I want to go over some of the Buckeye targets who have moved around in some of these rankings, some good, some bad. We're also going to hit on some running backs, some linebackers, and some wide receivers today. Now, there's a lot of people, whenever I bring up high school rankings, that they have in their head, like this was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and inevitably mention things like Chris Olave was a 3-star, James Laurinaitis was a 3-star, which is true. And there are exceptions. That's why that sticks out. But things are very different. This industry, it's just 20 years old, and there is a huge interest in recruiting. For instance, if I was to do a video tomorrow talking about Ohio State's national championship or something in Ohio State history that we would all love to talk about, and I did a separate video that was about Ohio State recruiting, the recruiting one would get double the views. We all like to reminisce, but when given the option, we always want to know what's next. And recruiting and covering recruiting has become huge business, which is why we've seen a huge player in On3 come into the space, investing a ton of money, which in turn has caused 24/7, their top competition, to invest a ton of money. But what do we get as the consumer? We get a better finished product. We get more camps around the country. More scouts get hired. The states that produce the most talent are covered from county to county. So no, you can't predict what's going to change in 3 years from an 18-year-old kid, but you can see how that particular prospect stacks up against his peers. And what we're seeing right now, really, really good coverage, and it gets better every year, of high school players, particularly finding your 300 to 500 best prospects in the nation. So I want to put into context just how elite these guys are when we talk about 5-star, 4-star, 3-star guys. There are roughly 1.04 million high school football players in the country, according to the National Football Foundation. That's freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors combined. And if you divide that, obviously that's 250,000 per class. But we all know, especially if you've played freshman football and then to your senior year, how much attrition there is over time in high school football. So if there's a million total, that probably means when these guys originally get rated, there's about 200,000 in that junior class. So out of those 200,000 football players, a 5-star is a top 32 player in that class, 32 out of 200,000. A 4-star is a top 370 to 400 player out of 200,000. And a 3-star is a top 2,000 player out of 200,000. Which means a 3-star player is an elite football player. Like there's not a bunch of 3-stars when you go to a high school game on Friday night. You're not looking at a bunch of 3-stars. That's an elite football player if you ever get that ranking. So certainly that player can get better and outshine his counterpart 4-star player, you're still looking at an elite guy. He's just not as much of a sure thing. But really, these ranking updates just give me a chance to talk about some of the guys the Buckeyes are in on the most, because we don't got a ton going on today. So let's get to some of these updates. The first one I want to talk about is one at On 3, one at 24/7, and he's a guy that I consider a can't miss prospect out of the state of Ohio. That's Sincere Johnson. Sincere Johnson has been a 4-star fringe top 100 player pretty much every service for a long time, even before James Laurinaitis offered him. James Laurinaitis really took his time offering Sincere out of Glenville. He offered Jacoby Clapper out of St. X first, Storm Miller second, and then the Glenville contingent came down to Ohio State to camp, and Sincere performed in that camp really well. Still didn't get his offer. Now, Sincere can wear 235 pounds, like 240 pounds pretty easily. He's got a lot of room to grow, and he was being viewed as kind of a tweener. But that summer, he told me he was going to be 215 by the time the season started, which is exactly what he was. And then he got his offer, looking fast, looking sleek. The dude's an animal. And now On 3 has moved him to number 38. This dude is the 38th player in the country, just a couple ticks off of a 5-star player out of Glenville. Like, finally, I've been screaming from the rooftops, like, this guy is so elite. But things have also gotten a lot harder for the Buckeyes with Sincere. Obviously, while he was waiting for that Ohio State offer, there wasn't a ton of super top dogs that had offered him yet. There were some Big Ten offers. Notre Dame was sniffing around. But since then, you've now got Alabama, Oklahoma, USC, all of whom he has official visits scheduled with. And things have changed for our dude with this recruitment. Alabama, the most serious threat here for, in my opinion, what is a can't miss guy. So you've got those officials. And it's interesting. Something that did not used to happen often is Alabama coming up into Ohio. And we've now seen Kalen DeBoer coming up to Cleveland to see Sincere, coming up to Akron to see Rock Hill over at Hoban. As of right now, I still think Ohio State is going to be the selection for a Glenville kid and Sincere Johnson, who, he's got his good buddy, not just his good buddy, but Arvell Reese is someone he really looks up to. He's modeled his game after him. He just thinks the world of him. He even wears number 8 because that's the number Arvell wore at Glenville, which, by the way, is the number Arvell will be wearing at Ohio State next year. He was wearing 20. He's going to wear 8. Now, we've lost a couple of Glenville kids over the years. Pierre Woods went to Michigan. Frank Clark went to Michigan. Both turned out to be awesome players at Michigan. But when we look at these linebackers that James Laurinaitis is in on, the ultimate dream here would be the number 1 linebacker in the country, Tyler Atkinson, with Sincere Johnson, Storm Miller, and even with some room there, you'd add CJ Sana too. I don't really love Ohio State's odds to pull Tyler Atkinson, which means Sincere Johnson, Storm Miller, and CJ Sana, which would be an awesome 3-pack of excellent Ohio linebackers. But Sincere, in my opinion, is a must get. And ultimately, I do think James Laurinaitis will lock down the Glenville dog, Sincere Johnson, who is now the number 38 player in the country. Congrats to our dude. Next up, a 2026 commit out of Avon, Jacob Weatherspoon, who has moved up from 170 to 133 in the country. I think he ends up breaking the top 100. When we talk about 5 stars and 4 stars, obviously, the 5 stars, the top 32. 4-star goes down to 400th player in the country. Top 100 players is how I judge a class. When I'm looking at a class, let's say I'm just pulling up Michigan's class or Oregon's class or Texas's class, I'm scrolling down. How many top 100 players do you have in the class? Not how many 5 stars or 4 stars. Top 100 guys, because the variance in 4-star range is huge. The 37th player in the country and the 380th player in the country are not the same. So I'm looking at top 100 guys. I think Jacob Weatherspoon will finish this cycle as a top 100 guy. I don't think there's as much excitement around his commitment as there should be. A lot of that has to do with the fact that he kind of committed it was an awkward time. It's like kind of flew under the radar. There was a lot going on, but Jacob Weatherspoon is a total dog and obviously moving up the rankings for a reason. Second Buckeye commit, we've got Buckeyes wide receiver Jaden Ricketts, similar to our guy Weatherspoon, moved up from 243 to the top 200 in the country. And that's big time for a guy who was a camp offer. This dude absolutely floats, and he's pretty polished as a wide receiver, burning fast. And I really think if this guy was playing in Texas or playing somewhere where he was playing 7-on-7 ball, getting noticed by a lot of different coaches, he'd be a top 150 guy. All right, here's a big one. Offensive lineman Felix Ojo out of Texas, big-time Buckeye target. He really likes the Buckeyes. He moves up to, at On3 and 24/7, a 5-star top 10 player in the country. Now, Jackson Cantwell, the number 1 offensive tackle in the country, Emmanuel Iheanacho, the number 2. That makes our guy here, Felix Ojo, the number 3 tackle in the country. That is 3 offensive tackles in the top 10 of the rankings. This guy, Felix Ojo, could finally be that big-time, out-of-state 5-star tackle that everybody has been longing for forever. He isn't David Sanders. He isn't Jackson Cantwell. He isn't Manny Iheanacho in terms of this is a guaranteed stud. He could start as a freshman, but he is a 5-star tackle in the top 10 of the country. As I said, from Texas, and Texas and Ohio State currently thought to be his top 2 schools. Michigan and Ole Miss also in this as well. But can Tyler Bone do it? I believe he can, because I really think that Felix Ojo, like Micah Smith, top 100 offensive lineman down at Vero Beach, TJ Alford School, I just think that Felix Ojo really connects with Ohio State. I think this is trending Ohio State. Now, I don't really care a ton, I'll be quite honest with you, about landing. I'm not talking specifically about Ojo, but about landing that whale, that superstar, 5-star, top 10 offensive tackle. Of course, I want him. Yes, I want him to take a swing at those guys. But I find it way more important to land 5, hopefully 6, high upside, stud offensive linemen that won't cost 5-star money. And what we've seen out of Tyler Bowen so far, putting out a whole lot of offers. Most recently, this kid from Massachusetts, Marky Wahlberg. It's not really Marky Wahlberg. What the hell is his name? Let me pull him up here. Where's Wahlberg? Here we go. Marky Wahlbridge. Marky Wahlbridge, 6'6", 270, top 400 player in the country out of Needham, Massachusetts. So Marky Wahlberg out of Needham, Massachusetts. Michigan's big in on him, have been for a long time. Tyler Bowen just offered him. Now, Tyler Bowen, following the strategy that he must be a JUCK. We laid out this strategy perfectly. Cast a bigger net. He's now contacted over 30 different offensive linemen. He's offered 5, already tied the number of offers that we had last cycle already. And he is taking a swing at a couple of the big dogs. Jackson Cantwell has an official visit. Felix Ojo, an official visit. And then he's focusing on the northern United States for his quality, high 3-star and 4-star offensive lineman, where he's just fighting Penn State, Michigan, Notre Dame, instead of the entire South, to try to pull a kid out of there. 4 out of his 5 offers have been to kids from Massachusetts, Illinois, Colorado, and Idaho. Number 5 is Evan Goodwin out of Arkansas, which is a really good offer. That's a really good offensive lineman. I asked Evan Goodwin what he thought about Ohio State growing up as a kid in Arkansas. He said he never really followed football programs, but he has watched a lot of Paris Johnson, followed his draft. And Evan Goodwin now has offers from LSU, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Texas A&M. Coincidentally, similar size to Ben Congdon, Ohio kid who just committed to Miami, and rated right with him. But I do think Evan Goodwin's film, the competition in his division is a little bit better. So it makes you feel more comfortable with that, until you see the guys in person. At any rate, Tyler Bowen following the strategy perfectly. I love it. He's focusing on northern guys. It seems to make so much more sense because we make those guys up here. You know what I mean? Like, there are some areas of the country that, yes, they have more athletes and they play 7-on-7 ball year round. Like, we make offensive linemen here. Let's take advantage of the things that we actually do well. Max Riley, Avon Lake. This is one of our big Ohio State linemen, one of our top 4 lineman. We called him the Ohio 4 for the first year of the show. He is a 4-star top 100 player in 24/7, down to Clemson and Ohio State. You got 2 crystal balls in for our guy here to go to Clemson and play for Matt Luke, Pawpaw, as we know him around here. That's the Clemson offensive line coach. On 3 has dropped. Okay, so 24/7 has this dude as a top 100 player. On 3, he dropped him a ton. They dropped him down to a 3-star. I don't know why. I'm trying to dig into it to find out what it is happened here that had them drop him down so far. But really interesting. So you've got him very in on Clemson and Ohio State. Those are his final 2 schools. He'll make a decision probably not too long from now. And then you've got Adam Guthrie, who is currently at Clemson for the entire week with the entire family. And as you saw yesterday, I showed you that tweet that he put out talking about his undefeated basketball season. And he was in a Clemson uniform and tagged Matt Luke, the Clemson offensive line coach. So things are not trending great with Adam Guthrie. And should you lose Max Riley, you would lose 2 of your top 4 linemen to Clemson, which is just bizarre. However, how can you fault Tyler Bowen? He's just walking in here on the job. You know what I mean? So at any rate, I think he's going to get a fantastic offensive line class. So I'm way less stressed about it than I was before, because the way he's doing it, the mojo he's got going on with these guys is just palpable. You can feel it. You can feel it when you talk to the guys. I love it. Now let's get into running backs. Just the other day, I showed you my top. So I got 3 backs that I really love in this class. Jay Lamar is my number 3 guy. And I was so puzzled as to what it is that other people were not seeing with this kid, as he was outside the top 10 at On 3 at 24/7. Well, On 3 is updated. He's now inside their top 10 backs. This dude's electric. He tricks people into thinking he's a little dude out there when you're watching him. He's 6'2", 205. And he looks, by the way he moves, like a small guy because he's so much faster than you think he should be. Just a total stud. 24/7, still not in on him yet. He's still a 3-star, the number 21 back in the country, which is insane. I checked with Jay last week. Jay told me he plans on an official visit to Ohio State. It's not planned yet, but he has a good, strong relationship with Coach Locke. And then he dropped a hashtag. Guess what he dropped? Hashtag Lock Boys. Yeah, that's awesome. So if you're not familiar, Lock Boys are what Lock Boys are what Trey and Quinshawn call themselves. Like Coach Locke, Lock Boys. And that's the hashtag he dropped. So we know Coach Locke really likes him. Jay Lamar is a total stud. It reinforces my thinking that I'm not missing anything. This dude is the real deal, that Coach Locke likes him so much. I think he's pretty special. Now, here's an odd one. You got 3 top running backs in the state of Ohio in 2026. And these 3 backs in the state of Ohio are all rated in the top 12 running backs in On 3. And the number 1 guy out of these 3 is Henry Ollinger out of Grandview Heights. He is the number 6 running back in On 3's list of all the running backs in the country. Number 6 out of Grandview Heights. Then you got Sean Alston out of Harvey High School in Paynesville as the number 9, and then Favor Aki as the number 12. Now, normally, none of these guys get Ohio State offers. And if we had 3 guys in the top 12 at a position group and not even one held an Ohio State offer, you guys know me, I'd be freaking out, man. I'd be freaking out, because whenever it's even close, I always defer to an Ohio player because I think it pays dividends in a lot of different ways. This is a guy, I'm not talking about any of these guys. I'm talking about when I'm comparing an Ohio high school football player versus an out-of-state football player who are of similar talent. Deferring to the Ohio guy is just an absolute given to me. He's grown up loving the program. He understands the traditions. He's happy. He's at home. He's much less likely to transfer. Everyone in that Ohio community is extremely happy that they sent a kid to Ohio State. And the majority of high school football players, it's their dream to play at Ohio State if they're playing football in the state of Ohio. And it's a dream come true. So whenever it's even Steven, like, I'm always deferring to the Ohio guy, and I always will be that way. Now, Henry Ollinger, this is really puzzling to me. As I said, they got him ranked as the number 6 running back in the country. This kid, for one, is a better linebacker than he is a running back, and he's not even close to a top 10 running back. Like, I don't know what this is. It's really odd, and it's reflected in his offers. He's got second-tier Big Ten school offers. He's 24/7's 44th ranked back, and that looks about right to me. A good football player, no doubt. I am not seeing this at all. Then you got Sean Alston from Painesville, who is committed to USC. He did not get an Ohio State offer. A very quality back. I was surprised he got SC. I hope he kills it out there. But had Ohio State offered, I'm never upset or disappointed when Ohio State takes an Ohio kid. But it's not an offer I would have been jazzed about. Then you got Favor Aki, and this is the one that's the most interesting when I'm looking at these guys' film. 5'11", 200 pounds, very interesting running style. He is physical in that he's hard to bring down, but he doesn't look to bring the boom. He sets people up real nice, hits the hole at almost full speed, and really sets these guys up to just take glancing blows because he's through the hole so quick. Not super great top end speed, but he's got a confusing running style. He's just a little different, and that's a good thing. He'll be visiting soon. He has got Miami, USC, Penn State offers, and he's just a really interesting prospect. And I think that it's more likely than not that he ends up with an Ohio State offer. Now, he told Letterman Row that he will be coming March 17th to spring practice. He's been building a relationship with Coach Lachlan, talks to him every single day, but that March 17th visit will be making things official, he said. I'm not quite sure what he means by that. Maybe there's an offer coming and he knows about it. But Coach Lachlan told him, according to him, that they may offer, they may not. So I don't know. But 1,800 all-purpose yards in 9 games last year, I would feel pretty good with this guy as the number 2 back in the class, providing you got one of your big dogs up top. Now, Coach Locke's 1B target in this class, Derek Cooper from Chaminade Bandana. That's Jeremiah Smith's high school. That's Kenyatta Jackson's high school. And they got another one here. And this is pretty bizarre. So I'm going to show you a little bit of Derek Cooper here as I'm talking. Derek Cooper is an animal. For one, he plays like 4 different positions, excels at all of them. Widely considered as one of the top 4 backs in the class. And he's a total stud. On3 has him as the number 163 overall player, which is just bizarre. He's a 5-star in 24/7, top 32 player. Coaches are diving over each other to get at the one-time Georgia commit. And he's going to be a big one, man. He's already 6'1", 205, and he plays violently. And I think the Buckeyes are in really good standing with Derek Cooper. I would put my money on right now that either Derek Cooper or Jay Lamar are going to be the number 1 back in this Buckeyes class. Either one would be a massive win. Derek Cooper, as I said, was committed to Georgia. Jay Lamar being heavily pursued by Georgia. They're thought to be the front runner. But Georgia also big in on Savion Hyder, the number 1A back in the class. I'm hoping that Georgia gets Savion Hyder because even though the Buckeyes are in on him, they're not going to get him. This is a Michigan and Georgia race for Savion Hyder, which means if Georgia gets Savion Hyder, Michigan doesn't, and then they don't take Jay Lamar, and the Buckeyes can get Jay Lamar. You've also got Jonathan Hatton out there, who is on most people's board right on these guys' level, and he's certainly a really, really good back. I just wouldn't be quite as excited with Jonathan Hatton as I would Jay Lamar, Derek Cooper, or Savion Hyder. Now, okay, this is the one people got really mad about. Chris Henry Jr. Chris Henry Jr., the 6'5", smooth as, I don't know, what's smooth? Smooth as velvet. Smooth as velvet. Velvety Chris Henry Jr. dropped to the number 4 wide receiver, the number 27th prospect in the country at On3. And I know that many feel this was on purpose. There are a lot of Ohio State fans who feel like these rankings are sometimes manipulated to get a rise out of us, because when we are in on something, we are in on it in big numbers. And the backlash over this one, I don't think was as big as they thought it might be, if that's the case. But they do this often. We see it when we saw it with Devin Sanchez over the cycle. At one point, they just dropped him for no reason. It just makes no sense. Okay, here's this senior guy having a great senior season. He's a total freak. All of a sudden, we're going to drop him down and put these two guys ahead of him, like stuff like that. And a lot of people think they do it on purpose to get a rise out of us, which may or may not be true. But they dropped Chris Henry Jr. down to the number 4 wide receiver in the class. Behind Tristan Keys, he's number 1, and he's a wide receiver from Mississippi who's really the only one out of these top 4 guys that I would consider potentially as valuable as Chris Henry Jr. He's just sick, nasty. And we're seeing so many wide receivers now step into college football that are so polished. The coaching has never been better for these younger wide receivers. They're playing year round, and you can see it in the junior film of so many of these guys. Wide receivers in certain areas of the country are just so polished now. But some guys are truly unique. You can't teach anybody how to be 6'5" with a 7-foot wingspan that can move like Chris Henry Jr. You can't teach that, but you can make Chris Henry Jr. better. So On3 commented on Henry's new ranking because they were getting, it was pretty newsworthy, a bit of a backlash. And they said, this is a fluid evaluation and one that is changing over time. I think we're excited to see him once he gets back full go. Remember, he was injured last year. Hopefully we get to see him this offseason. And if not, we'll be monitoring his senior season at Mater Dei really closely. But still, a really talented prospect. I feel like he's a guy that Ohio State fans should be excited about having in the fold and a bunch of upside there. But we just felt like this was probably a more accurate representation of where he stacks up in the receiver group at this point in the cycle. All right, so we talked a lot about the Ohio State wide receivers in this class. The Bucks obviously have 2 committed already in Chris Henry Jr. and Jaden Ricketts. I don't think we've talked about Messiah Hampton since he was offered much other than, Messiah Hampton got offered. And I don't believe I've ever showed his film. We talked about Braylon Robinson last week. That's the 5'8" burner out of Red Oak, Texas. Talked about Jabari Mack out of Louisiana. Obviously, Caden Dixon Wyatt, Chris Henry Jr.'s teammate at Mater Dei. And those are all guys that things are on the up and up in this class with good relationships with Brian Hartline. Guys that are, clearly in the mix to potentially get those remaining 2 spots at wide receiver. But the number 1 player in the state of New York, also a big target for Brian Hartline, as well as now Oregon, USC, and Miami. He has officials scheduled with all of them. Being in the state of New York, the Syracuse wide receiver coach, Ross Douglas, was all over him. He, of course, now the Oregon wide receivers coach. And one thing we know is there's not going to be a bidding war going on when it comes to a wide receiver in the class of 2026 who's not named Chris Henry Jr. So if Oregon really goes all out for Messiah Hampton, the Bucks they're out of it. But this is a dude now, and I want to show you his film because I am just so impressed by this guy. I don't think I gave it enough time the first time around when Ohio State originally offered him, but just take a look at him, man. An absolute burner. He's big, 6'1", muscled up, good hands, just a total electric athlete, and a joy to watch. Obviously not the best competition. And I noticed these guys play all their games during the daytime, which would suck, man. I would hate that. You got to be under the lights on Friday night. Now, I had like 3 other segments planned. However, we're at 46 minutes. So let's get to a couple of comments and we'll call it a day, because remember, we're going to come back on and go live after Ryan Day and whoever talks today ends up talking today. Dan says, only you can get away with wearing that scarf. Apparently you guys didn't know I'm a scarf guy. I got 3 that have been sitting on the chair the whole time I've been doing the show. Mark Lewis says, one bad game, Mike Keister, Juck. You don't go from a once projected top 10 pick to a 4th rounder over one bad game. Might want to check out the Toledo game from his sophomore year. If you are saying he was projected as a top round pick, Mark, of course, is talking about Denzel Burke. In my comment that Denzel Burke was thought of in a totally different way after that one single game against Oregon, which is totally true. You just admitted it. He was thought of as a top 10 pick, and now he's thought of as a fourth rounder after that game, not after Toledo his sophomore year, after that game. Lunatic Fringe Buckeye offers up Georgia Tech as a suggestion for our new helmet in the JUCK studio. And now we got everybody telling me that everything is orange again. Now, saturation is off, says Joshua. Mark Standahar says everything is orange, JUCK. And Chris says Jack measured in at 6'4" at the combine. Yes, he did. 6'4", 260. Anyway, I messed with the color again. Let me know today, guys. What do you think? Is it any less orange? And that will do it for this morning show. Don't forget, we're going to come on later after the press conferences. We'll talk about those. And hey, maybe we'll do a live weekend show again. That was about, I think, 11:30 or 12 on Saturday. So check me out then. Please like and subscribe. Talk to you soon. JUCK and Bucks.